that goes into planning your estate. And so this is step one. Mike is going to help us understand wills and trusts and the differences. And then we hope in January to have that other workshop, which is a little more extensive. Pastor said he'd be willing to do one on helping make our burial and funeral wishes known, which I think would be great because anyway, I think that would be great. And we could together, if you wanted to, fill out a healthcare directive, a post. I'm not looking forward to doing that. I'd rather do it with my friends, and we can have some guidance. So just fill it out. If you're interested, we'll try to make those things happen. But Mike, thank you for your willingness to help us start the conversation, begin to think about this topic, and then we'll take it out of Senior Connections into maybe a Thursday or a Saturday workshop series and learn together about how we can make our wishes known and have peace of mind going forward. So without further ado, I better say, Mike, and many of us have known Mike for a while. He worked at Concordia. He's been a basketball coach. He's been in our district, I think his entire life, practically. Yeah. And we're very pleased that he works at our Northwest District with Lutheran Church Extension Fund. Let's give him a warm welcome. Mike Madison.
Yeah. In 2003, we moved here, and we went to church here for about 5 years. My son, Stephen, was a sixth grader, and we was part of the confirmation class. And unfortunately, Pastor Ben retired, and we had an interim pastor here for 3 years, and my wife and I moved over to Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in East Vancouver. But I've done a lot of things. I was a Lutheran elementary school teacher. I worked for Nabisco Albertsons. But I was a fundraiser for Concordia for 20 years. 2 years, I was a fundraiser for Peace Health Vancouver. And 3 years ago, I had a chance to go to work for the Northwest District as a vice president for Lutheran Church Extension Fund. So the reason why I bring that up is my day job is doing loans and investments for the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church of the Northwest District. So when you guys built the sanctuary in 2002, you took out a loan with Lutheran Church Extension Fund. I'm the person on the ground now that does that for Lutheran Church Extension Fund. So I just want to say thank you for this ministry. Thank you for your investments, because if we didn't have investment dollars, we couldn't do loans. We're able to do loans all over the district. We have $41 million worth of loans out there. 72 churches or schools use our money. We have $75 million worth of investments. So we have a very good flow of cash. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to help ministry. So thank you for that. As a fundraiser, I got real involved in raising money, and I'm not an expert. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a CPA. But I know quite a bit about planned giving and how to go about that. And unfortunately, following VSO and talking about estate planning after their unbelievable performance, it's kind of hard to do, because why do we not like to talk about estate planning? We're talking about end-of-life things. And estate planning is pretty complicated. There, I got a checklist. You can Google it anywhere. There's 10 things you need. We're only going to talk about 1 or 2 today. And what's real important in January, if there's an interest, I like to get the Lutheran churches together. We have an expert back in St. Louis that will come out here. We'd have a state attorney up here. We'd have a CPA up here. We may even have an insurance person up here. And you can ask all the questions you want about tax laws and things like that. They change all the time. Even in January, with the end of the year, those people are going to have to be rating a lot, because normally January 1st, things change. I'm not going to talk about the details of those things. I just want to start the conversation. And why do I want to start the conversation? Well, about 7 years ago, my mom died. And she had a very simple will. We had a piece of property outside of Port Angeles, 20 acres. She had 6 what we call CDs, and it was great. It was very simple. My oldest brother was the executor of the will, and she wanted everything to be divided a third, a third, a third. We sat down with the attorney. We looked at the 6 CDs, and those CDs are outside of the will because there's beneficiaries on them. Well, that's interesting. My brothers, my 2 older brothers, didn't know anything about that. My mom didn't either. My middle brother, who took my mom to the bank all the time, who took my mom to the hospital, doctors all the time, took my mom to re-up those CDs. And when they came to talking about the beneficiaries, guess how many names were listed on that beneficiary? 1, my middle brother's name, Kurt. Well, that's outside the will. The will says everything's divided 33.34, 33.3, and I'm the youngest, I got 33.3. I got 33.3% of the land that were sold. But those CDs came up, and the 4 out of the 6 had 1 name on them, my middle brother Kurt, because he was so nice to my mom. We sat down with the attorney, and guess what the attorney said? He looked at my middle brother and I and said, those 4 CDs are all yours. And thank goodness, my middle brother said, well, my mom wants it to be divided a third, a third, a third, like the other 2 CDs. If he wouldn't have said that, my oldest brother and I wouldn't have had no grounds to stand on. But more importantly, my mom dies. It's a week after her funeral. My 2 brothers and I were out on the farm. We have our fancy trucks. We all had 3 big trucks. I had the best one. I had a Dodge Ram, a Ram truck. They had a Ford, and one had a Toyota. We're standing there, and we're talking about tangible assets in this state. And my dad had about 15 guns. There was 1 pistol, little one, that Grandpa Jim, my great-grandpa, had when he was a sheriff in Tennessee. And that little pistol's not worth a lot of money, but the oldest son verbally received that gun. So my grandpa was the oldest son out of 6 kids, and he received that gun. And Grandpa Roy hung that gun on a nail as you walk in his house in Spokane, about this high up on a nail right by the door, and it was loaded. And every time we went into that house as a little kid, he goes, there's 2 things you don't touch in this house. You don't touch the candy that I give my dog, and you don't touch that gun. But we knew the story. It went to the oldest son. Grandpa Roy dies, and guess what? My dad's the oldest son out of 5 people. And my dad got that gun. It was really cool. And we talked about that gun. We made up stories about that gun. And then when my dad died, my mom got it. And then when my mom died, my oldest brother Guy was supposed to get it. And my oldest brother Guy likes to hunt. And so he likes guns. My middle brother doesn't. We're standing around those trucks a week after we buried my mom, and Kurt, who never went to college, who was a man of few words, said, well, I got something I got to tell you guys. Yeah, Kurt, what do you want to tell us? I was pretty close to Mom. And Mom, about 6 months ago, told me she really wanted me to have that pistol. And it got quiet. My oldest brother is a peacemaker. And I looked at him and he said, well, if that's what Mom wanted, I guess it's yours. And they both looked at the little brother, me. And I said, what? Kurt, you're crazy. You know the story. Generation after generation, that's been passed down. You could feel the tension. We walked away from that meeting, and I thought our family would never be the same. A month later, we're out there standing around our trucks, cleaning out the farmhouse, and my middle brother said, you know what, I've been thinking about this, and you're right, Mike, Guy should have that gun. but it's little things that can divide a family. That's the importance of having an estate plan. It's so important. And you probably could tell stories too, because you probably have had parents and uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters that have passed away. But it's so important to have that laid out. And as you look at these handouts that Lisa put in front of us, it can get complicated. It can get very complicated. You know, what is a will? What is a living trust? Beneficiaries, healthcare directives, financial power of attorney, and things like that. We're only going to talk about two things today to get you thinking about what might be the best avenue to go with your estate. Does anyone have a definition for a will? I Googled it this morning, and it says a will: a legal document where a person specifies how their assets should be distributed after their death, who should manage the estate, and the guardianship of any minor children. It assures a person's final wishes are heard and help prevent disputes among family members by clearly outlining the distribution of assets within a probate estate. Pretty clear. Anyone know what a living trust is? A living trust is a legal document where an individual transfers ownership of their assets to a trustee to manage for the benefit of designation of benefits. That trust is effective the day the trust is created and as soon as you put your assets into it. So it's a living trust. Basically, it's there to do the same thing, but it's when you're alive. So why would you pick a will over a trust? One of the biggest factors is a will is a lot less expensive. A living trust will cost you 3-4 times more. Another reason why someone would pick a will over a trust, a will is for a simple handling of your business affairs. A trust handles complex cases. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you have 3 kids, and one of the kids wants everything you want and will contest everything. Unfortunately, that happens. A living trust is a little bit harder to contest, to prove that they are entitled to everything. Has a little bit more legal guidelines. Another reason why a living trust would be better than a will, let's say you have property in 3 different states. If you have property here in the state of Washington, you go to Alaska all the time, you got a little cabin up there, and you in the winter time down in Phoenix, and you got properties in 3 states. A living trust incorporates all 3 states. If you have a will, you have to go through probate in each one of those states, which takes time and money. So the complexity of your estate determines that. The other reason why you might want to go with a will over or a estate over a will is public knowledge. Once you die and that gets filed at the courthouse, I could go in and look up Pastor Larson's estate and see how much he's worth. It's public has access to that. A living trust is much more private. The other big reason for having a living trust over a will would be, I'm just thinking here, privacy, multiple states. It helps with blended families. You can have better guidelines if there's a second wife. Let's say your first wife or first husband passed away and he has kids. You can be real specific on that. Another reason would be a living trust avoids probate normally. Probate can take time. It takes some money, but it has to go through a judge. And if the will is laid out correctly, the judge will honor that, but there's no guarantees. The probate is public knowledge, and it takes time. So some people ask the question, do people use both a will and a living trust? And the answer to that question is yes, and that's called a pour-over will, P-O-U-R, will, over will. So your living trust is anything you put into that, any assets. And if you forget to put an asset into that, that's outside of the living trust, a will cover that. And that you have the flexibility with that living trust to add, to change, and things like that. So those are some of the differences. There's probably 40 different reasons why you would pick a will over a living trust or vice versa, but those are some of the key ones. And that, I point that out to you because I want you to start thinking about what type of legacy gift do you want to leave your kids and your favorite charity? And that's so important. And the easiest way to leave a legacy gift, let's take, for example, to your favorite church, St. John Lutheran in Hazeldale. The easiest way to do that, the least expensive, the quickest, is you probably have a retirement account or a 403B or a life insurance policy or a CD at the U.S. Bank, or maybe you even have a LCEF investor account with us. Any of those things have beneficiaries after it. Normally, if there's a husband and wife, it says if Don dies, Dan dies, my eyes are bad, Cynthia, no, Krista gets 100%. Then if Krista dies, their lovely children get divided 33, 33, 33. Yeah. And but the easiest way to leave a bequest or a legacy gift is looking at that IRA or that retirement account or that investment account and changing that beneficiary. And that's just a simple form you mail in. And each kid gets 25%, 25%, 25%, and then your favorite charity gets 25%. Anything with a beneficiary is outside the will. And all those organizations needs when you pass away is for the person in charge of your estate to send them a death certificate. And that organization will divide that money up and mail that money directly to those individuals. And that bypasses probate, it bypasses any judge, anything like that. So that's something to think about. My mom didn't understand that, and when those CDs, they thought all those CDs were in her will. They're outside. Anything with the beneficiary. Life insurance policies are the same way. But that's the simplest way to leave a legacy gift for your favorite charity. I will stop there and ask, do any of you have any questions? Yes. Living trusts will have designated recipients of the assets in that living trust. But if you don't put the asset in the living trust, it's outside of it. Do you see what I'm? You can create a living trust, and a lot of people do that, and they'll put the house in there, but they don't put any other assets in there. And you got to put all those assets in that living trust, and you have designated rules on what you want to happen with those assets. So you do. I don't think they're called beneficiaries. What are they called, Gary? In a living trust, they're called. Yeah, of the living trust. Yeah. Yeah, you do have a director for that. Yep, designated. And that's the good thing about a living trust. When you create a living trust, you have a trustee. You create that trustee immediately. So when you do a will, if you don't do a power of attorney and you get incapacitated, there could be some complications with that. But in a living trust, you think about that up front. But that's another step in estate planning, is dealing with power of attorney. That's one of the pieces of paper. The other big piece of estate planning is your medical directive. That's bigger and bigger and bigger today than it was 30 years ago. Those are two big parts of estate planning. Yes? Your living trust will be documented with the state, yes. That living trust is documented. Right, correct. So, I was going to say, I'm just looking at my notes here. That's why a lot of people that have complex estates will do both. But every time you talk to an attorney, it's expensive. And so some people will have a living trust and a will just in case they left something out of their living trust. The other thing, why it's important to start thinking about this now, let's say you have an idea, you have a simple will, and you want to upgrade it, update it. Coming to these things, getting your thoughts down, talking to your kids, and working through that before you make that phone call to your attorney can save you a lot of time. Okay? And the anytime you can save time with an attorney or a paralegal, you're saving money. And getting those thoughts down and getting your questions answered ahead of time before you go to attorney, normally to draw up a will should only take you 2 or 3 hours if you have all your thoughts down ahead of time. And so you're looking at $350 an hour. You're looking at, under $1,000 to do a legal document like that normally. But if you go in with a ton of questions and you're not sure how you want to do this ahead of time, you're going to have another visit and another visit. And that's why it's important to start doing research on this, to upgrade your will or to start one. It's so important. And that's why in January, if we have a panel of experts and we have a lot of people here, you can get specific questions answered about tax ramifications. I'm not an expert on that. I know they changed the tax, inheritance tax and all those things. They change it every year, it seems like. But a couple years ago, we were doing one of these. I was in Southern California, and the federal inheritance tax, it was $13 million per person. Joint, it was $26 million before you had to pay federal inheritance tax. Well, that has changed. Well, we had a person in the audience ask one of the experts, what's the limit? And I only knew that because the federal attorney said the federal is $26 million for a joint return. And then the next question, about 5 minutes later, we had people write out questions. They asked, what happens if you're over $26 million in your estate? Well, it gets taxed extremely heavy. And so you try to avoid that. And attorney, a tax attorney or a state attorney can help you avoid some of those burdens. Gary.
I think, based on my experiences, Mike has given some really good information here that's really helpful. I think what he said about these are a lot of these are living documents. They're you need to review them every once in a while because things change. If you have if you don't put something inside the trust, it's not going to be managed according to the trust. That means you have to change the name or the title on something that you're going to put listed as the XYZ trust. Otherwise, that asset's not going to go to the people you want it to inside that trust. And one of the big problems today is people generally, before they die, they might be vulnerable. They might be a vulnerable adult. I have a sister that was that way, and my mom died a few years ago, and we're still dealing with some stuff. And my mom didn't want some money going to my sister's boyfriend. And unfortunately, that wasn't quite handled right because some stuff that was supposed to be in the trust didn't get into the trust because there was some misunderstanding with the insurance company on how they do the beneficiary designation.
Yep.
So we ended up with my sister getting a fair amount of money after we had helped her with the divorce. And now she's got a guy that's after her, a boyfriend, and then they get married. And that causes a whole other thing. So if you want to restrict where money's going to go, and you want to be kind of specific so that people that who might be vulnerable and don't make good decisions or whatever, you might want to have some provisions in there that would address who's going to handle this money if this person gets remarried or whatever. And so you may be able to put some restrictions on like that rather than just depending on that vulnerable daughter getting this thing, the prenuptial agreement done, that she never does.
Yep.
And so
Good.
these documents are just very, very important, and you have to review them periodically because people's health changes and your thoughts about what you want done might change. And so, good
Yep.
job.
Good. Yep. And the living trust, you can make it very, very restrictive. A will is pretty cut and dry. I was fortunate that I have two brothers and myself with very similar backgrounds. We worked all our lives. We were all healthy. We all had we were all married once. We all had healthy kids. We all were in the same economic standard. And I'm just thankful that my middle brother wasn't down on his luck or a drug addict or extremely greedy and wealthy, because he could have walked away with, we're not talking millions and millions of dollars, but he could have walked away with a lot more money than my oldest brother and I would have got. And these are, no matter what you do with a will or a living trust, they are alive. There's things that you should visit yearly and look at. And I'll close with one more question. Yes.
Could you expand a little bit about how a trustee is appointed, what the qualifications are? Does it have to be an attorney, et cetera, et cetera?
No, the person creating the living trust can pick the trustee to manage. Yeah, yep. It's who you believe in.
But you don't know if they're going to be alive.
Well, well, exactly. So I'll leave this in closing. It's a person. Well, that's why you want to pick someone a lot younger than you. Someone in their 70s or 80s. No, I'll leave you a personal story. My wife and I, we went with a will. when we had kids, because in a will you can designate people that will take care of your minors, your kids, when you die. So our kids get to 18, and we're looking at our will, and Phyllis is going, well, our kids aren't going to want to live with Uncle Richard. We got to change this, because now they're 18 going to college and stuff, so we change our will again. Our will is designated a 33, 33, 33, kind of like her mom and dad did with their estate and what my mom and dad with our estate. And in there it says, we hope that you give to your favorite charity on behalf of your mom and dad. So we got the same provision in our will. But just recently, my wife retired, and I'm still working, and I love what I do. And I'm looking at my three kids, my 2 daughters and my son. My son's 32. He's the youngest. My daughter's 42. My 2 daughters are married, and both of their husbands make way more money than I do. It just shocks me. I mean, I worked 3/4 of my life to make as much as my dad made. And my 2 son-in-laws are doing quite well. Both daughters are stay-at-home moms. And I'm talking to my wife, and my son's not married, but he does all right. And I'm talking to my wife, and I go, we got everything divided a third, a third, a third. Do we really have to leave that much for each one of our kids? Is there something we can do to leave a legacy gift at our church or to our favorite charity? And we're thinking about that now. And then on top of it, my wife and I were fortunate enough to, when my mom passed away, we bought a house in North Spokane. Even though it's in the state of Washington, we own 2 houses now. Because I do a lot of work out of Spokane for the Northwest District. I got a place to stay up there. My son manages it. And now we got 2 houses. I'm still paying on that one because I'm still working. And I'm thinking, even though it's in the state of Washington, it's a different county. It's going to be a different jurisdiction. Would it be better to go to a living trust? So we got some decisions to make. And like Gary was saying, just because you did a will or a living trust, you need to revisit that every year or 2 years or 3 years, especially when something significant happens in your family. If your son gets a divorce, or unfortunately if someone passes away. It's so important to do that. And this is just the beginning of this conversation. Remember, it is complex. And someone described this to me where for a lot of people, the language in estate giving is kind of like when computers first came out, the computer language was a foreign language. Well, estate planning and wills and living trusts, we don't talk about those things often, the vocabulary. It's different. It takes a little energy, a little time to study. And eventually, you'll sit down with an attorney or a CPA or both to figure out what's the best plan for your family and your legacy. And my prayer is that you don't wait long on that you put your orders in a fair right now, because you never know what will happen. January, if everything goes well, we take this a little deeper and talk about power of attorney, talk about tax ramifications. We'd have actual experts up here taking questions, and that will be the next step to this process. Great. It's 2:00. Sorry to talk about death and dying, but you know, the one thing I like to close with is Psalms 100. And I don't have my Bible in front of me, but it's one of my favorite Bible passages. I was just out at Trinity Bend. They're celebrating their 100th anniversary. And in Psalms 100, verse 5, it says, God is always with us. God's love is strong, it endures forever. His faithfulness will be with us. His faithfulness to us, not our faithfulness, but to remember God is with us every step of the way. Psalms 100, it's 5 verses. It's a pretty neat verse. You might want to read that to remember that no matter what's going on in your life, God will always be there. It's steadfast, his love, and it endures forever. Amen.